Hello everyone, welcome to my podcast. Today our topic will be media bias in news reporting, and we're going to have a look at three different texts and we will analyze them to make a conclusion on how media bias, or how media in general, what it reveals about our society. Humans seem to have a tendency to bear a desire to search for information in order to understand their world, make sense of their culture, either in relation to their private lives or in relation to distant cultures. The existence of news serves as truthful information, and as such, journalists have almost always taken a stance as a matter of professionalism, of integrity, and objectivity. However, in modern times, with the existence of mass communication, news serves more as propaganda than a trustable database. Therefore, the focus of this further oral activity is to analyze the use of languages in news reporting and the methods news reporters utilize for mass communication. The first few texts I will go through base around different views on Trump's travel ban from Human Events, MSNBC, and PBS NewsHour. Each represent the conservative, liberal, and centrist views on the event, respectively. The first text, by Human Events, takes a right-wing stance and starts off with two powerful words: everything and lie. These words reflect the opinion of the writer, and already we see modality come into play. It uses quotation marks to show skepticism and satire in the term Muslim ban. The next paragraph uses a polysyndeton and uses very strong diction to grab the attention of the audience. Using a polysyndeton allows arguments to be expressed concisely and stack up on each other. The editorial then goes on to justify the travel ban by comparing it to previous such events. The reasoning is flawed, as the author expects all situations to be related, implying that they all require the same measures to deal with, but that is not necessarily true. The second text by MSNBC, takes a liberal, left-wing stance and mainly refers to politicians and high-ranking military officials to support its argument that the travel ban is the wrong way to go. It is evident that the text chooses its sources carefully. It is important to understand that the production of news is a profession with a set of processes and routes which shape the final product we call news. The drive to remain unbiased and to be a check on those in power has remained a high standard, if sometimes a lofty one, for news organizations, and is a goal of both private and supported institutions. In terms of the tone of the article, it takes a very objective stance by making references to other individuals through quotations, making it very difficult to identify a specific tone for the article. MSNBC is an example of a private news company, and as such needs to choose the most interesting stories in order to generate income to sustain themselves. Thus, they have more freedom as to which news to broadcast, but they must have the responsibility to feed the public. The third text is a short video clip by PBS NewsHour in which two individuals with separate views on Trump's travel ban express their opinions. The tone of both the individuals is very confronting and with strong intent. This is evident that they're clear and smooth talking with supporting facts. This serves as an example of the use of ethos, as the audience is able to understand that the individuals are firm on their stance and are knowledgeable about the issue. The text makes references to Trump's speeches and its party representative, which can be an example of bias by labeling, since it's tagging politicians and groups with extreme labels while failing to bring liberal politicians groups to light to the same extent. It is important to note that PBS is a government-funded organization, meaning that they are directly influenced by the committee that provides them funds to keep operating, and implicitly the people that pay taxes that ultimately support their programs. Thus, public-funded news media such as PBS must be aware of desires and concerns of the audiences. The context can explain the relative neutrality of the text, as the government would not want a biased news report. The text spends a major portion interpreting the 1965 amendment of immigration into the United States. One of the reporters refers to there being no mention of discrimination in immigration on the basis of religion when Trump, in a speech, clearly states banning Muslim immigrants. The fact that the reporter makes his own interpretation of the 1965 law is an example of bias by spin. This is evident by his subjective comments about objective facts, which makes his side's perspective sound better than another. The article by Slate magazine criticizes a news report published on February 2012 on the increasing numbers of single-parent families using information solely from the tone of Ohio. It states that the article resorts to subtle bias, which tends to be more dangerous than overt prejudice. This forms a layer of liberal thinking which blankets the judgment bias evident. The main idea of the passage is that now a majority of the babies born to mothers under 30 are now born to single mothers. The article starts off by stating, "It used to be called illegitimacy, now it is the new normal." without identifying the subject, it immediately gives a negative impression of not belonging or marginalization. It then goes on to state, reviewing the academic literature, Susan L. Brown of Bowling Green State University recently found that the children who were born to married couples on average experience better education, social, cognitive, and behavioral outcomes. This claim cannot be experimentally observed through statistics and is very subjective. Claims such as these cannot just merely be generalized just by reviewing academic literature. Furthermore, the text goes on to end with a quote from a single mother, saying she would like to do more with her daughter. This is evidence that the text assumes that the feeling of wishing you could spend more time with your child is unknown to the married working mother, who of course never feels that she is too tired or is too distracted to do something she wanted to do with her 6-year-old. One of the single mothers in the text states, "I want to do things with her, but end up falling asleep." This quote suggests that the mother cares for her child. However, it is placed out of context and criticizes the ability of the single mother to take care of the child, disregarding the fact that the mother might just be too tired. The author also uses diction when stating, "Meanwhile, children happen," which gives a shrug of the shoulder acceptance to an event that is usually seen as life-changing. Another problem is that the text solely considers the city of Ohio, which, as an anomaly, has a strikingly high percentage of unmarried women with children, at 63%. Using this city as a reference might make the author's claim more specific, but it reduces the ability to generalize the claim, but that is exactly what the author does. The final text, by Politico, reports Donald Trump, as a president, tweeted that getting approval from the debt ceiling bill was now a mess. He blames Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, House of Representatives Speaker Paul Ryan, and the Democrats. This text makes heavy use of subjective language and sensationalism to exaggerate certain points of argument, opinionating an already subjective statement by Trump. It is evident that in the headline itself, the author accuses Trump of being agitated. Throughout the text, the author resorts to quoting small parts of the text and commentates for the majority of the time. For example, the text states, Trump goes on Twitter attack on Thursday, just days after telling a Phoenix crowd, "I don't do Twitter storms." This fallacy, known as quoting out of context, completely changes the meaning of the quote. The straw man argument involves quoting an opponent out of context in order to misinterpret their position, typically making it seem more simplistic or extreme, in order to make it easier to refute. It is in this way that the authors use bias by spin to change the argument in their favor. The author makes a subjective conclusion out of Trump's quote even though Trump might not explicitly mean it. After a quote accusing the lack of motivation inherent in Trump's presidential role, the text states, and Trump blasted the fake news media on Thursday morning for pointing out the whiplash nature of his speeches in recent days. Words such as blasted and whiplash are evidence of the text's heavy use of sensationalism to give the reader an unconscious understanding of the author's opinion on this matter. Employing the technique of sensationalism, though less evident in more professional news companies, can give rise to two consequences. Some issues are difficult to pictorialize and require sustained analysis. Their dramatization leads to an inaccurate or misrepresentative reporting. Furthermore, by using sensationalism and supporting one side of the view, dramatized news has the potential to impose a clean and tidy sense of closure on complex and enduring issues with beginnings, middles, and endings. In terms of context, the text falls victim to the common media bias of personalization. Most news stories focus on individuals rather than institutions, and emphasize human interest angles and emotional impact, often at the expense of broader social contexts and political perspectives. The incidence of subjectivity in labeling certain individuals in this text serves as evidence for this. Authors tend to blame specific political actors for social ills and are less likely to understand the underlying factors or root causes of the problems. Having access to millions of viewers and listeners gives the media considerable power. Producers of television and radio programs have a great responsibility since their media can be highly influential on public opinion, and public opinion is the pulse of the nation. Thus, mass media has a profound impact on societies and their culture, including changing the public's attitudes towards the situations such as presidential elections. And media bias can shift the public opinion drastically, changing the course of a nation in the context of history. And now with the advent of the World Wide Web, it is much easier to convey information globally. Whether that is for the better or for the worse, only time will tell. Thank you for your time.